Today, 106 people are sitting in cells across Japan, waiting to die. But unlike death row inmates anywhere else in the world, they have absolutely no idea when that day will come. If this video makes you think differently about justice and punishment, hit that subscribe button. You're going to want to stick around for what comes next. Most of the developed world has moved on from the death penalty. Europe abolished it decades ago. Canada ended it in 1976. Australia in 1985. But two wealthy democratic nations in the OECD still execute their citizens, the United States and Japan. And while America's death penalty gets constant media attention, protests, and documentaries, Japan's system operated in near total secrecy for generations. It wasn't until 2010 that journalists were finally allowed to see inside an execution chamber. What they found was a system designed with psychological precision, a machine built not just to end life, but to extract maximum uncertainty from every moment leading up to it. Imagine waking up every single morning not knowing if today is the day you die. Not in some philosophical sense, in the most literal way possible. Every footstep in the hallway could be coming for you. Every voice outside your cell might be reading your name. This is the reality for death row inmates in Japan, and it's been deliberately designed this way. The Japanese government claims this uncertainty is merciful. They argue it prevents suicide, that it maintains emotional stability. After all, they say the victims of these crimes weren't given advance notice of their deaths either. But spend a moment considering what this actually means. Menda Sakai lived this way for 34 years. Every single day for 3 decades, he didn't know if guards would come to take him to his execution. In 1983, he was freed, not because of appeals or new evidence initially, but because the police officer who arrested him finally revealed he had concealed Sakai's alibi. The alibi that proved he was innocent. Sakai spent 34 years in this psychological torture chamber for a crime he didn't commit. Then there's Iwao Hakamada, who holds the world record nobody wants, the longest-serving death row inmate on the planet. He spent more than 45 years in prison, waiting, before being released in 2014 for a retrial due to possibly falsified evidence. 45 years of waking up and wondering if today was the day, living in a space roughly the size of 4 tatami mats, about 64 square feet. That's smaller than most American parking spaces. Inside, a sink, a toilet, bedding, and a small desk. And everything in that cell, every object, is deliberately designed with rounded edges, not for comfort, so the inmate can't use anything to end their own life before the state does it for them. Here's what makes Japan's continued use of capital punishment so puzzling to researchers. Every pattern that led other countries to abolish the death penalty simply doesn't apply. In Europe, the fall of authoritarian regimes brought an end to state executions. Hitler, Mussolini, Franco, Salazar. When these dictators fell, their countries ended the death penalty. Japan's authoritarian state also collapsed after World War II, but executions continued. In Austria, Great Britain, and France, left-wing governments abolished capital punishment when they came to power. In 2009, Japan elected the center-left Democratic Party of Japan. The death penalty remained untouched. The United States maintains capital punishment partly due to its history of racial discrimination and enslavement, and its extreme inequality. Japan is ethnically homogeneous, with far less inequality. None of the typical explanations work. And the statistics make it even stranger. Japan's homicide rate is a tiny fraction of America's. It's lower than every European country that's abolished the death penalty. You'd think a country with less violent crime would be less likely to execute people, but here's the shocking part. The percentage of murder offenders sentenced to death in Japan is roughly the same as in the United States, despite having far fewer murders. In 2018, Japan executed 15 prisoners from a death row population of about 116. The United States executed 25 people that year, but from a death row population of over 2,500. Do the math. Japan executes a much higher proportion of its death row inmates. And sometimes Japan executes in batches. 7 members of the AUM Shinrikyo doomsday cult were all killed on the same morning in 2018. The cult that released sarin gas in the Tokyo subway in 1995. all 7 executed within hours of each other. The legal process is equally disturbing. In America, death penalty cases are treated as fundamentally different from other criminal cases. You go through a bifurcated trial system. First, a trial to determine guilt or innocence, requiring a unanimous jury. Then, if found guilty, a completely separate trial just for sentencing. And to actually receive the death penalty, you need another unanimous jury decision. The judge can only impose death after this double unanimity. Florida and Alabama used to be exceptions, but even they required a supermajority. Japan's system is radically different. Under the Saiban system, ordinary citizens sit alongside professional judges as a panel. They determine both guilt and punishment in one proceeding, and all that's required for a death sentence is a simple majority. Think about what this means. Imagine a panel of 9 judges. 5 could believe the defendant is guilty and deserves death. 4 could believe the defendant is completely innocent and deserves no punishment whatsoever. With that vote, with that narrow margin where nearly half believe in total innocence, the defendant can still be sentenced to death. There are 7 detention centers across Japan authorized to carry out executions. The justice minister decides when they happen. Once the minister signs the death warrant, the prisoner has 5 days left, maybe. These warrants are typically signed right before political recesses, during holiday periods, times when media coverage drops off. The executions aren't announced to family members or lawyers beforehand. They only find out after it's already done. Imagine being a family member. You visit your loved one on death row, having no idea it might be the last time you ever see them alive. On the morning of execution, the inmate hears unusual noises outside their cell. Maybe more footsteps than normal. Maybe voices. The door opens. They're brought to a prayer room first. Here, a spiritual advisor reads them their last rites. They're given time to write a final will. Maybe they're offered some snacks or a cigarette. Then they're taken to another small room with an altar. For Buddhists, it displays a figure of Buddha. For the rare Christian inmates, a crucifix. In this room, the prison warden officially reads the execution order out loud. Then the inmate sees blue, curtains covering the entrance to the next room. Guards wrap a bleached white blindfold around their eyes. A black hood goes over their head. Their hands are handcuffed behind their back. Their knees are tied together. They're led through those blue curtains. In America, lethal injection is the primary execution method. In Japan, there's only one method: hanging. The execution chamber has 2 red squares painted on the floor. The inmate is positioned to stand in the center. Directly beneath is a trapdoor. In an adjacent room, 3 officers enter. They cannot see the prisoner. What they see instead are 3 identical buttons mounted on the wall. 2 of the buttons do nothing. The third opens the trapdoor. None of the 3 officers knows which button is real. This distributes the moral responsibility. Some sources mention a delayed circuit that further obscures which officer activated the mechanism if buttons are pressed at different times, though this detail is harder to confirm. For their participation in this lottery of death, each officer receives 20,000 yen. That's about $180. Watching the execution are officials: the head of the detention center, a medical officer, the prosecutors. The medical officer waits 5 minutes before confirming death. After the body is cleaned, the families are finally notified. The body will be cremated unless the family requests otherwise. For certain high-profile inmates, the state keeps the ashes in custody. It was only in 2007 that Japan even started releasing the names of executed prisoners publicly. What's perhaps most disturbing is that polls consistently show the Japanese public supports the death penalty by a clear majority. This isn't a system maintained by an authoritarian government against the will of the people. It's maintained with popular support, which raises uncomfortable questions about justice, vengeance, and what we're willing to accept in the name of public safety. Tomohiro Kato was the last person executed in Japan. On July 26, 2022, after 14 years of waiting, his cell door opened. In 2008, he had driven a truck into a crowd in the Akihabara district of Tokyo, then stabbed people, killing 7 and injuring 10. His execution marked the end of one story, but 106 others continue. 106 people sitting in cells right now, waiting. The most recent person sentenced to death row killed 36 people in an arson attack. They're waiting too. Here's my question for you. Leave your answer in the comments. If you could design a justice system from scratch, knowing that innocent people have been sentenced to death, would you include capital punishment? And if so, what safeguards would you put in place?